This is my 165th video on my work with OO gauge. See part 1 of this series for my reasons for getting into OO gauge when I already had a lot invested in working in N gauge and I didn't really have space available for a large, fully operational OO gauge layout. Also see my series on my N gauge railway modelling for smaller and more complex scenery and smaller scale trains running. This part will continue my progress with my Hornby Dublo 3-rail tabletop railway. This time I'll be going forward further with my 3-rail track work, adding a reversing loop and cutting some track to make a custom length. I'll also be trying a couple of Dublo station pieces to see how they might fit in with my track. This is the basic design that I came up with for a track plan to fit on my 6 foot by 3 foot 4 inch tabletop. I derived this by combining and adapting a bit ideas from a couple of track plans given in different Hornby Dublo pamphlets, as discussed in my previous video. In my previous video, I actually set up the outer loop sections of this plan as indicated by the blue letters here. So this is what I had on my tabletop at the end of my previous video, and I tested a loco on this and it seemed to work okay. Now I wanted to proceed to the next step, which was a bit more tricky. I wanted to add the reversing loop connecting the two sides of the lower loop section. To do this, according to the Hornby plans, I was going to need sections incorporating straight track 1/8 the length of a full straight. And I didn't have any 1/8 sections of Dublo 3-rail straight and couldn't readily obtain them. This was how it looked to me as I started to move on to this section. I was going to need 2 standard right-hand points, 2 isolating right-hand points, 2 full curves and 1 half straight to add the reversing loop. And once the reversing loop was added, it appeared that I would need to make up sections 2 1/8, 2 5/8, and 3 1/8 in length to connect the straight sections of the plan back up again. The only way I could see that I could do that would be to try to cut track to make sections of custom length. I also wanted to consider how the station elements I was proposing to incorporate in the track plan might fit. And I didn't really know exactly what size those station elements would be, so I thought I'd better try to find out. The 2 items seen here were the only ones I currently had on hand. I bought these locally here in Canada. I have some other things coming, but they're on their way from the UK and haven't arrived yet. Still, I felt that these items should actually be enough to let me know how the station might fit in with the track plan. I took them out of their boxes. A little assembly was required. Ronald Dodds in his videos seems to refer to items of this type as aluminium, but they seem to me much too heavy to be made purely of aluminium. I'd assume they must be made of some sort of alloy. Anyway, they're certainly, of course, metal. The ends of the platform fitted to the central section by just inserting the prongs and twisting. Checking the assembled island platform against track, it proved to be the length of 2 full straights from the end of one ramp to the other. The footbridge was a little trickier to assemble, and I took the pieces to the bench. Fortunately, it came to me complete, including the screws and square nuts required to hold it together. The step sections needed to be inserted into the ends of the central section from the top, since there were notches at the top of the steps into which the posts of the central section fitted. Once put on this way, the end sections sat quite positively even without the screws, but they were of course intended to be screwed on. There were little ridges underneath, between which the square nuts were obviously intended to fit. I inserted the screw from the top through the steps and the centre section. Then I held it in place with a finger whilst turning the bridge over. Then I threaded the square nut onto the end of the screw. And finally I tightened the screw with a screwdriver, bringing the square nut into place between the ridges. With the steps fastened on this way at both ends, the bridge didn't immediately sit level, but the metal is quite soft and can easily be gently bent to get everything to sit level, with the ends of both stairways sitting properly on the ground. I placed the island platform and the footbridge on the tabletop approximately where I thought they might go as per my track plan. I also had a Dublo level crossing on hand. This did come from the UK, but it arrived quite quickly. I figured this would be the best place for the level crossing, but the track was so close to the edge of the table that the level crossing would stick over the edge. I moved all of the track back a bit, making it very close to the back edge of the tabletop. I'd sort of anticipated that I wouldn't have a lot of room to spare. I just hope everything will work okay, given how close it is to the back now. I was a bit concerned about the track sections of these types. Would simplex couplings run over these tracks without causing problems? Would the uncoupling track actually uncouple things? I tried some Dublo wagons on the tracks. I used wagons with factory-fitted simplex couplings of both the metal and the plastic types. Here are two wagons with metal couplings sitting on one of the tracks with fixed pieces beside the central rail. It doesn't appear that this should cause any problems with the couplings. I think these tracks are probably made to go with the level crossings. Here are two wagons with plastic simplex couplings on that same track. They may be a bit closer, but I don't think there should be any problems. I was honestly a bit confused as to how these manual uncoupling tracks were supposed to work. Moving the lever doesn't seem to have any real effect when couplings are in the middle of the track. I think that these tracks are supposed to work by pushing the couplings up when they go over the raised ends of the plastic pieces with the lever in the raising position, though honestly I'm still not quite clear how well this is going to work for uncoupling stock. I'm not all that concerned about having this functionality. It's pretty much just as easy to lift the end of one of the wagons, but I'll probably play with trying to get this to work at some point. For now, I went ahead with getting track pieces ready for the reversing loop. 2 regular right-hand points, 2 isolating right-hand points, 2 full curves and a half straight. As before, I fixed up the fish plates where possible and replaced them with modern Atlas Code 100 fish plates where they were too badly mangled or broken. I cleaned the top of all the rails with 600 grit emery paper on a wood block, paying special attention to getting the centre rails clean and cleaning all of the electrically significant rails on the couplings, which was quite tricky. On the points, I mean. Then I cleaned the fish plates and the connecting tabs on the ends of the rails with electrical contact cleaner. I used a multimeter to test the continuity, making sure there were no shorts between the centre rails and the outer rails and that the points worked properly. I did need to bend the moving contact on one of the isolating points a bit to get it to only pass power to one track at a time. Then I took the new pieces over to the tabletop. I was getting ready to install the reversing loop. I decided that I needed to have an isolating tab in the middle of the reversing loop. This wasn't necessary for the trains to pass over the reversing loop itself without problems. The only reason that I wanted this isolating tab was that I didn't want power to ever pass from the front track through the reversing loop to the inner section of the back of the loop, since I wanted to be able to park trains on that section when the isolating points at either end were set away from the section, and if the reversing loop passed power, it would cause those trains to move when I just wanted them to stay parked. To create that break in the passing of power, I intended to use an isolating tab. Now, Hornby actually used to provide isolating tabs. I think they included them when you bought points. But you rarely find the original Hornby tabs. It doesn't matter, they were just little squares of flexible non-conductive material that could be fitted between the two centre rail connecting tabs when two pieces of track were joined to stop power being passed. You can see the two connecting tabs here. The isolating tab would just be slid into place so that it would sit between the two connecting tabs, stopping them from connecting and passing power. I thought of using card at first, but came to the conclusion it would be too thick and too rigid. I just stuck some Scotch tape to both sides of a piece of paper, and then cut out a little square. And I fitted that over one of the connecting tabs and then slid that under the other connecting tab as the track pieces were joined. So you can see here that the taped paper is sitting between the two tabs and stopping them joining. I checked with the multimeter and there was indeed no connectivity between the two centre rails at the joint. I took those two connected and isolated pieces back to the tabletop. I detached the left end part of the track at the end of the straights, which I needed to do in order to be able to install the reversing loop. Now I connected a half straight to the inner curve at the back and then connected two sets of points to that. The top set of points is a regular set that will pass power at all times, in all directions. The lower set is an isolating point which will only pass power in the direction the point is set to direct trains. An isolating point is required there to allow trains to be parked in the sidings that are going to be connected to it in future. This is not for the reversing loop, it's so that the sidings can be isolated for parking. If the reversing loop were being created without any branch sidings coming off it, you could just use a simple curve there rather than a point, a half curve. The Hornby track plans indicated that an 8th track would be required to connect the back and front straights up properly, but it seemed to me when I put things together that quarter tracks would work, and I actually had 2 quarter straights. Unfortunately 3 would be required, so I'd still need to make a custom piece. I connected up the reversing loop. I used the 2 quarter straights that I had to make up the front and back sections of the inner loop. I moved the power feed straight to the centre of the front and put one of the half straights with the pieces beside the centre rail at the left end of the front straight, with that piece fitted through the level crossing, which I think is what it's for, and it does look fairly sensible like that. According to the Hornby plans, this was not quite right. They said to use 8th straights, not quarters, but I was hoping it would work okay. I still had the issue of the gap in the back straight. I didn't have another quarter straight to fit in there. The shortest thing I had left was half straights, and they definitely weren't going to work. So I resorted to cutting. I marked the length of a quarter straight on the back of a ruler. You can see the little black marker there at the end of the track, and then I measured that against the end of a full straight piece. The length came out just short of the first insulating piece supporting the centre rail. I laid the steel rule across the piece and started to cut with a razor saw. This was not very easy. Sawing through the brass rails was quite slow. Ronald Dodds said that he cut pieces, but in the videos that I saw he never actually showed how. I rather suspect that he snipped the rail with cutters, but I didn't really want to do that. Basically because I thought it would be hard to really get it straight that way. Sawing through the tin plate was even harder than sawing through the rails. I'd certainly rather do as little of this as possible. This is what the end of the cut piece looked like after I finally sawed through everything. I used pliers to bend down the tin plate base a bit so that I could get fish plates onto the ends of the outer rails. You can't use a fish plate with the inner rail because it doesn't have any, well, it doesn't have a profile, with a base. I joined the piece of quarter length that I had cut to the end of the regular full straight with fish plates on both outer rails and an isolating tab over the connecting tab on the end of the full straight so it wouldn't short to the base of the cut piece. I checked the continuity. Outer rails connected, centre rail of the full straight not shorted to the base, and centre rail of the cut piece not currently connected to anything, which was correct. I cut a little piece of card and shaved it to the right thickness and fitted it under the centre rail of the cut piece, and then superglued it in place, as otherwise there would have been nothing supporting that end of the rail, and the centre rail could have bent down and touched the base and shorted things out. Here's the bottom of this connected piece, showing the cut piece connected to the full straight, and the isolating tab protecting the tab from the full straight. I cut a piece of wire to length to fit between the two tabs of the centre rail and stripped the ends of that wire. Then I put that wire into my helping hand and tinned the ends of it. Then I soldered that wire between the two tabs, creating continuity between the centre rail of the full straight and the centre rail of the cut piece. It was hard to get the solder to take on the tabs. Flux didn't seem to work. Cleaning the tabs with solvent didn't seem to work. Finally, I got the solder to take by filing the surface of the tabs a bit, scraping the surface with a file to expose clean metal. I checked with the multimeter to make sure that the two centre rail sections were indeed connected and that nothing was shorting out. Finally, I installed this joined section into the back straight, connecting that straight back up. So, now I had my reversing loop installed and I tested it with a loco. Things didn't work on the first attempt this time. There were some joins where things weren't connecting up properly. The new fish plates that I'd installed proved a bit tricky. They're thinner and more flexible than the old ones, and it's hard to get them onto the rails properly and easier to make a mistake and not notice it. The loco also showed some problems on the points, and I fiddled around with things trying to get them work as best as I could, bending guide rails a bit, etc. I was also a bit alarmed to see that there were some sparks underneath the loco when it passed over the non-isolating points. I couldn't see that anything was actually connected wrongly on the points themselves, testing things with the multimeter, so I'm thinking that perhaps the sparks just occur naturally as the centre pickup passes over the inevitable breaks in continuity of the centre rail. So what I now had was this. I've cleaned up my track diagram here to reflect the exact specific track sections that I've actually used. Next, I wanted to think about adding the inner branches. I was thinking in terms of something like where the blue lines are here, but the track sections underneath the blue lines are not exact, and my diagram isn't perfectly to scale, so I thought I'd better experiment with some actual track to see what might fit together well for these branches. Here I've laid out, but not connected, track sections as they could go to fit with the island platform. I have another slightly larger station coming from the UK, like a larger building, but I think it'll be the same length, and that should fit on the other side of the tracks where the footbridge is in this picture. I believe this should work okay. The point is an isolating one, and I want that so that a train can sit on one platform track whilst another train moves onto the other platform track. I'm thinking maybe the footbridge can go here, but I'm not too sure about this. I figured that the other branch could also have two tracks. Since nothing needs to sit between the tracks here, they don't need to be so far apart. The point that I've placed there is actually a standard non-isolating point. Really, I want an isolating point there so that the two tracks can be powered independently. But at the moment I don't have any more isolating points. I do, however, have some more isolating points coming from the UK. Ultimately, I think I'm going to put an engine shed on the end, a double-track engine shed on the end of this branch here. So that's about it for now. I need to prepare the track sections for the inner branches before connecting them up, and I don't have quite the right points on hand at the moment. Also, I'm afraid that there may still be some problems with the track that I have connected up. I also don't have any buffer stops for the ends of the tracks yet, but those are also coming from the UK. Things are sort of moving forward to about as interesting a track plan as I can manage on this little tabletop. So now I'll finish with a little running video of what I've got connected up so far. So let me see if I can demonstrate a bit of running on my track work as far as I've got it so far. Now, this may not go all that well because I'm not too convinced I've got this track, connected up and laid down as well as I might. There are sort of areas where it doesn't seem to be lying down as flat as it might, and it moves a bit as the engine goes over. Nothing screwed down yet, and I don't quite want to screw anything down yet, but let's see what we can do. Also, without a handheld controller, I've got to bend down to operate the train. Let's try and get him going. We're still using, so I need a little bit more power than that, but not too much more. The points are all set straight at the moment, so he's just going round. He does speed up a little bit, that's the problem. He starts off slow and then speeds up. I don't know. I didn't really see the sparks there, but it seems to me sometimes you get sparks underneath him as he goes over those non-isolating points. Let me see if I can see. No, I can't really see any sparks now, but it did seem to me before there were sparks. And that's where he's going over there, so that's the section I joined up. I custom cut and joined up. Makes a little bit of a clunk as he goes over the points at the ends there. There's the custom section. Okay, let's try and stop him there a moment. And what should we do next? Well, let's alter the points to try to send him around the inner section. And how's the back? Yes, that the point for the reversing loop is set straight, so he won't go over the reversing loop. Bit hard to control his speed precisely. Seems to be slowing down maybe a little there, perhaps due to voltage drop, I don't know. Okay, across the level crossing and round the back loop there. Ooh. Now I didn't do anything there, but he randomly stopped, you see. Oh, he's derailed. He wasn't ready, derailed a bit there. That's not good. See what I mean? This is still not really working properly. And I don't know what derailed him. I really don't know. Okay. Trying to operate the power with my left hand. Is he railed right now? Yes, he is. I don't know how he got derailed there. So let's see if I can think straight. What happens if I try and send him through the reversing loop? Turning straight. Straight. Turning. That one has to be set to turn, and then he's going to come out of here. So we want that to be turning, but then if he came back here and hit that point again, he would derail, so I'm going to have to stop him as he gets round there, but let's see what we can do. over the isolator there, round there, back round to here. Now I have to stop him here to reset this point, because if I didn't, he would hit that and derail, and also he's going to go round there again now, so I have to reset that point. Okay. So now let's see if we can get him moving again. Now note now that he's now going the opposite way because he's gone around the reversing loop. Oh, and he's got stuck on that point. And he's not derailed. He just got stuck on that point because I took him across the point too slowly, and there's a slight discontinuity at the point, I think. He was not derailed there, but he stopped on the point. Definitely still struggling a bit with his track work. Whoa. So I meant to turn him up there, down him down there when I turned him up. Now notice now, of course, that he's facing the opposite way now because he's gone round the reversing loop. But I'm still operating the controller the same way to make him go forward, because that's how 3-rail works. The forward direction on the controller will always make your loco go forward on 3-rail, towards the front of the loco, whichever way it's pointing. If the loco's pointing this way and I turn the controller forward, it'll go that way. If the loco's pointing that way, with the front of the loco that direction, and I turn it forward, it'll go that way, which of course is not how 2-rail works. On 2-rail, if forward is clockwise, the loco will always go clockwise when you turn the thing up forward, regardless of which way the model's pointing. So it's, it's the opposite way around. On 3-rail, direction is always relative to the model because the polarity doesn't change. It's coming from the center to the edge. Whereas because on 2-rail the polarity is going from one side to the other, the polarity is relative to the track, not the model. So it will always go clockwise forwards if you set it to go clockwise forwards, whereas forwards can be either clockwise or anti-clockwise on 3-rail, because it just depends on which way the model's pointing. Okay, let me see if I can back him round the reversing loop. Now, so that's the other problem, of course. Now, the only way I can turn him around again, now I can't take him forwards through the reversing loop because he's not facing the right way to get into the points that way. So now I've got to take him backwards, which means I operate the controller the other way. Famous last words. If we can get him to move. He seems a bit less keen on moving backwards. I have to give him more power. That's just a feature of the model, I think, that he needs more power to move backwards and backwards across the reversing loop. So now we're back to going the way we were. Generally speaking, whenever you've taken a model across the reversing loop, you're going to want to set the reversing loop points back again. Now, of course, these things, the roads to the station, the tracks to the station, and the tracks over here going down to where I'm intending to put an engine shed, they're not connected, they're just laying, because I was just trying to measure what would fit, so of course I can't go onto those. But if I could go into those, if I wanted to put him into the station, I'd set that point to turn, I'd set it to go into the station, I'd set that point to turn, that point straight, and then this point straight to go into that platform, or turning to go into that platform. Of course, the downside of this is if you pulled coaches into the station forward, you'd only be able to get them out backwards, which is a bit of a problem because coaches are probably not going to like backing across those points. And the only way around that would be to put an isolator at the end of the station so you could isolate the loco there and then bring another loco in to pull the carriages out forwards. Oh well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I haven't even connected up those tracks yet. I think we'll go back to where we... well no, maybe I'll just do one other thing. Where are we? So, where is he? We'll go forwards here. Famously. We'll go forwards over the level crossing, round to the back. Okay, now... Is he derailed again? Yes, he has. He seems to, I think it's this point sometimes derails him. He's derailed. I mean, he's not violently derailed, but he is derailed, which is annoying. Okay, now the point I wanted to make here is he's on that back rail now. Now, if I turn this point straight and this point straight, now this point is only passing power that way, not that way. And this point is only passing power that way and not that way. So there's no power coming in from that end or from that end, but because this point is these points at the end of the reversing loop are not isolating, the reversing loop itself would pass power up there and cause that train to move when I turned up the power if I didn't have an isolator there. That's why I have an isolating tab in the middle there. So all being well, turning the power up, full power, no movement. And that's what should happen. But it wouldn't happen if I didn't have that isolating tab there. If I didn't have that isolating tab there, because that point and that point are not isolating, so they're always passing power, you could get power passed up through the reversing loop and move the train on there when you don't want to. So that's why I put the isolating tab in there. It doesn't do any harm, and it does good in that sense. Okay. So we're going to turn that point again. Turn the right knob would help. Okay. Now I'm going to set that point straight again, and the other one is straight, I believe, because I never set it to turn. So now we should be back where we were at the beginning, going round the back. But we did have a couple of derailments, and I still don't entirely know where they're coming from. Well, it doesn't help that you know, they're not very violent derailments, they're rather subtle. I think it's that point. I think he's derailing on that point there sometimes when he turns, and I don't quite know why. I really don't quite know why he sometimes seems to derail on that isolating point at the end there when he turns on it. And he just derails sort of kind of subtly, so he looks okay, but he stops going because his wheels aren't picking up enough. Okay. I'm going to stop him again there. So, for now, that's where I am with my running. I mean, obviously, you know, I haven't even dared to try running an actual train with coaches on this yet. And I don't think I'm even going to till I finish. I'm going to finish laying all the track first. Then we'll check it with just a loco, and then we'll get into actually checking it with trains. And I suspect we'll have more problems because from my previous experience, it seems like the coaches are more picky about the track work. Well, that's a Westminster clock chiming the 3/4. Yeah, it seems that the coaches are more picky about the track work than this loco. They're more, and indeed even than the Duchess of Atholl. You know, then I guess they're maybe not quite as heavy and whatever, so they're a bit more prone. The coaches are more prone to derailing than the locos. So I suspect I'll have some problems getting coaches to go with the track work, but one step at a time.